Well, now let me tell you about Rudolph. It all started a couple of years before the big snow.
Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is an animated classic that has been telecasted every holiday season since 1964. So if you're familiar with it, then you already know what to expect, since this game does draw its inspiration from the original. And if you're not, simply put, it is something I do feel strongly that you should experience for yourself. Now, whether that's watching the original or playing this game, since the stories are quite a bit similar. I'm not going to go at all into the story. I'm really going to tiptoe around spoilers. So if you like that about reviews, then you've come to the right one. But what I do want to mention is that the voice acting here for the main characters felt appropriate, and I thought it was really well done. The story as a whole was incredibly enjoyable. It is a tiny bit different, I think, than the animated classic, at least going off memory, but it is similar enough to still provide this same level of enjoyment there. The music here is exactly what you would expect, right? It's meant to get you in the holiday spirit. It's very festive. A lot of the jingles you've heard many times before, so that's what you can expect in that regard. And I guess it did its job, because I definitely felt in the holiday spirit, even though I was playing this at the end of September, which, if you're wondering why, well, that's when they decided to release this game, at the end of September. Hey, I'm not here to question or review their marketing skills. I do think this probably should have launched at the end of November, but hey, it is what it is, right? So to go along with that, I think the visual aesthetic looks pretty nice. Now, I am playing the Nintendo Switch version. I did play it on Switch 2, so do expect this to be downgraded a little bit from its PC and console counterparts. And I do want to segue that into some of the issues that I did have, some of the things I noticed with not just the visuals, but the rest of the game as a whole. Now, typically with my reviews, I don't start out with my complaints and criticisms, but with Rudolph, since most of them affect the entirety of the game, I do want to get them out of the way, mention them first, because they are going to probably be deal breakers for some of you. But on the flip side of that, I do feel that all of these things can be addressed with some updates. Maybe they're not going to get the camera just right, but there are things they can tweak to improve this overall. So hopefully that's going to be what happens. But if not, day one, here are some of the issues I experienced. Now, the first one might seem a little nitpicky, but this was such a weird choice that I do want to mention it, and that it actually takes place in the menus. On the file select screen, if you hold the B button, this will delete your save file. Now, when I was here, I wanted to back out to the menu, and on Switch, B usually is to go back. But instead of putting delete save file on X or Y, they put it on B, and there's no way to get back to the main menu unless you close the game and go to the home screen. Weird choice. Then, the first thing, and I'm not going to show individual instances of this because you're going to see it throughout the entirety of the review. The camera is incredibly wonky and will fight you for the entirety of the time you play this, especially in the sections where you can't adjust it or when you're in close quarters. It's really bad at times, in like Nintendo 64 levels of bad, which is ironic because when we talk about the inspiration for what this game actually is, it's definitely a Nintendo 64 game. Then to go along with this, there is no camera sensitivity slider. So the only thing you can do is invert it, and the default camera speed is incredibly slow. There's so many times where I had to just stand still for like a second and a half, and wait for the camera to rotate where I want to look. This is not something that should be missing in a 3D platformer in 2025. It is the absolute simplest of options. Add it in, please. Then, as far as the visuals go, you're going to see the usual visual pop-in The seams in the world are visible at times. Ugly textures. All of these things are common in Switch versions this late in its life cycle, and I'm not saying that makes it acceptable, but it's basically expected at this point in family-friendly budget releases. So those are all of my main criticisms, and they're all things you're going to see throughout the entirety of this video. They definitely hindered my enjoyment, so I do hope they give this a quality of life pass, and I think some of those are things that should have been caught during testing, which makes it super frustrating that they're here in the final release. But now to get into what this actually is, it's a very simple 3D platformer where your main goal is always one individual main quest on each of the 4 worlds, and there are some interlude levels in between those worlds that are linear in nature, whereas the main worlds are more open and you can explore. There's lots of optional stuff you can do. I mentioned this clearly takes its inspiration from a Nintendo 64 game, and that's Mario 64. You're going to see a lot of similarities in how your character plays, your abilities that you have, and basically your objective. Now there's a few different collectible types that you'll constantly see me grabbing. The gold nuggets are your currency, and you can use these in the squirrel shop to buy 1 bell per world, and then additionally you can buy some hints if you're having trouble finding some of the bells. And then there's also Christmas ornament bulbs. These are the red balls you're seeing me collect. These are just tied to getting one of the bell. Sometimes they're tied to getting to a specific area that is blocked off by a sign that says how many you need. And then the last are the bells. Now these are the main thing you're going to be collecting, and it's the equivalent of the stars from Mario 64. They are somewhat tied to your progression, but most of them aren't required at all, as hitting the D-pad will bring up a quest log. There's very specific ones that you need to proceed the story and then travel to the next area. All the rest of the bells are going to be optional. If you're a completionist or you're just really enjoying yourself with the game, then you can go ahead and seek them out. There's going to be many different ways that you're going to acquire these. Some are simply hidden in the world. Others are behind platforming challenges or time trials, races. Sometimes there's puzzle elements, there's snow globes you can go into, and those are basically like challenge areas. Those seem to be the most challenging ones to get for each of the worlds. There's a lot of variety here, and a lot of them are pretty fun. They are scattered across all of the levels in the game, including the interlude levels. At any point, if you want to, you can bring up the map screen quickly and easily backtrack to any area that you've already traversed to. So nothing from what I can tell is missable, and it will track your overall completion on your save file, so that's pretty cool. Now to get into each of the worlds, I do have a few notes for each of them, and the first world is obviously your introduction to the game. It has very good objective variety and gives you a good taste of what's to come. And overall, I thought this first world was really fun. Then World 2 is actually the one that I disliked the most. There are far too many cryptic find the collectible objectives that are scattered all over an area that is very annoying to navigate and kind of confusing. It is helped a little bit by your ability to use the checkpoints that you activate as fast travel locations, but overall this one I didn't really like. And then the camera here seemed to be extra brutal because there are lots of close quarter areas that you're navigating around, and the camera just makes your life miserable here. I did not have a good time in this area, and I had to take a few breaks to eventually get through it. Then World 3 is pretty good. I liked having a new mechanic introduced to me with the Lara Croft style wall running, although this could be a bit wonky at times, and part of that is probably the camera's fault. And then World 4 is the final area. I don't want to say too much about this one because it'll potentially spoil some of the later story for those of you that want to be surprised, but it has some nice variety. It ramps up the challenge of the platforming a bit, and overall, I enjoyed this as a final world. I thought this was a good finale. Now, something I haven't mentioned yet is that there are 4 different characters that you can play as. Fundamentally, they play all exactly the same, and the abilities that you have and that you've seen me using throughout the entirety of this review up to this point, you can double jump, you can do a high jump by crouching first and then jumping, you have a slight glide to you that you can hold the jump button and you'll slowly float down as you go, and the further you go, the faster you'll fall, so there's some momentum tied to it that way. These are all things we've seen in many different platformers, and that's probably why I haven't really mentioned it to this point, but the game does introduce you to most of these. And I say most because it didn't teach me the high jump unless I missed it, which is something that you're going to need to get some of those optional bells and various collectibles. Rudolph's kit felt natural to me as somebody that plays a lot of different platformers and that has played like all of the 3D Mario platformers. I definitely see that they were going for that type of gameplay, and to a certain extent they accomplished it, but overall, like, the camera really hurt me here because it was fighting me at so many different points throughout the game. I don't really think that they could fix that part of it, but I think the other issues I brought up, they definitely could fix. This game is intended to be a chill platformer that is a little bit cozy and festive, and it certainly is, but it does introduce frustrating moments, and I don't think they're a part of the experience that they necessarily intended. I think that the main frustrations stem from the technical issues that this suffers from, and their limitations by not allowing you to adjust the camera the way you want. It really does fight you. But by far, the worst part of the game I haven't even mentioned yet. These take place in between the 4 main worlds. There are these interlude levels that I'll call them, and there's typically 2 in between each, and usually one's a boss fight, and then one's kind of this on-rails, linear, I don't even know what to call it, style level. There's no nice way to say this. These are the worst parts of the game. At least that's how I felt about them. They are thankfully fairly short, so they're over pretty quickly, but just the linear interlude levels, they control really bad. They're not fun at all, and while I do appreciate that they tried to mix up the gameplay, these hurt the game more than helped, and I think I would have enjoyed it more if they just didn't exist. The boss fights are okay. I don't think they're anything special. I wouldn't say they're horrible, but they're not great either. So I'm not going to show all of these. I won't spoil them because they're tied to boss fights, but these parts are not great. Thankfully, they're over fairly quickly, though. I think that pretty much covers everything, at least from my experience with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the video game. I thought that there's a lot of good here, genuinely, but I do feel like it's a game that needs a patch or two to fix some of the camera issues and some of the other little bugs I ran into that you might have seen as I was showing gameplay. It's a little rough. I can't really definitively recommend or not recommend this one, which is exactly why I did want to mention my issues first before even getting into the review. So this is ultimately up to you to decide. I do think that the difficulty is accessible for both kids and adults to have some fun with this one. So I definitely hope that you enjoyed this video and found everything that I laid out in great detail to be helpful. If you did, give the video a like. Comment below if you have any further questions, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and click the bell icon for notifications. And as always, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you next time.